Live from the Big Tomato, it's Kings Pod 2020 with your hosts, Geoff and Toke. What's going on, Geoff?
Toke, we are back at it. We're 5 games into the season, and I can't say there's a whole lot of positives to take away at this point.
Yeah, so we now have a text thread where we actually do talk about the Kings. So these takes are probably not going to be 100% fresh, but we haven't verbally talked about them. And I think that, you know, something always gets a little lost in text. So, Geoff, why don't you go ahead and give us your take on what you've seen in the first 5 games?
Yeah, I mean, you know, as I've watched these 5 games, I mean, essentially it's obvious what's happening. The roster construction of the Kings doesn't provide you a winning formula. We don't have the forwards. Our guards do the same thing. You know, we got our 2 best players arguably would be DeRozan and LaVine, and they do the same thing. And when they're on the court together, they can't figure out how to mesh together. They actually play better when they're not on the court together. They actually give themselves some room to operate. And I think it's obvious. You can tell, you know, we've done 4 different starting lineups, I think, throughout the first 5 games. So clearly Doug's searching for something. And the God's honest truth is I don't think he's going to find what he's searching for with this roster. So he's grasping at straws already. Granted, some of that's due to injuries. You know, Nate Clifford started game 1. And obviously he got injured right away, so there's nothing that you can do about that. That's obviously going to be a different starting lineup the next game. But you know, we've seen Keon Ellis in there, we've seen Westbrook in there. There's been some shakeups, and nothing's really sticking so far.
Yeah, there's no there, right? Like Doug's looking for something that doesn't exist. It turns out that positionless basketball actually doesn't work, and you do need people who can play their position. And starting 4 guards and an undersized center doesn't work. It turns out, actually, you need a forward. You need a playable forward on your roster. And when you lose the only playable forward you have on your roster, which I didn't put this in our notes, but we should probably also talk about the Keegan Murray extension at some point.
Right.
Not a fan. Just going to put that out there. And we could get into that. But
yeah,
I mean, you're starting DeMar DeRozan at the power forward position functionally. You're playing Russ as another forward. And then you got Zach LaVine and Dennis Schroeder as your backcourt. Like, there's not a defender in the bunch. I mean, Russ isn't like terrible, but he's also not a power forward. So you have a very poorly constructed roster. But more importantly than that, you don't have a playable forward. I guess that falls under roster construction, but it's like something very specific. It's not just that the pieces don't mesh and don't complement each other. It's also that, like, I don't know if I was the coach, would I start Dario Saric or Isaac Jones, who, you know, I don't think can play.
right.
But, like, it can't be worse than what you're rolling out, because ultimately what's happening is offensively there's no cohesion. But on the defensive end, they're playing like they're hustling on defense, but it's like every matchup's a mismatch. So, like, how... That's not an effort thing. It's not even really a coaching thing. Doug said something like, well, we could be I think he said it before the Chicago game.
Mm-hmm.
We could just as easily be 3-1 right now as 1-3. And it's like, yeah, you could also be 0-4. I mean, realistically,
I was going to say the one game we won by 1 point. So, you know, again, we're not 3-1. And it's like you always say, Toke, you're like, you know, you win by winning. You know,
you win by winning. That's it.
You can't say, man, no, if this would have went that our way or that would have went our way, because it didn't.
Yeah.
And so here we are. And again, I understand like Doug's the coach. He has to pump up his guys. He has to find the silver lining. He can't drag the Kings like we're about to do for the rest of this podcast.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, like, you gotta admit the situation. And so, my thought process is, my takeaway from these first 5 games is that Scott Perry is going to try to clean house, because there's no way Scott Perry is going to try to hang his hat on what's been going on in this roster that he didn't construct, right? This is not his roster. If you look at the way he handled New York when he was their GM, he cleaned house within the first 2 years, and he reformed that roster. Now, again, he didn't do an excellent job, but he reformed the roster. And so I think that's something that is probably on the horizon for us. Because again, there's no way that he's looking at this squad that he's running out, even understanding that DeMontis is probably not at full strength and that Keegan Murray's coming back. There's no way he's looking at this roster like, okay, we got something we can compete with. I think he's a better basketball mind than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard for this conversation not to immediately go to Doug Christie, so I am still going to push that off. But like just to say it, like the first move that he made was hiring Doug Christie, right? So like, how much control does he actually have over what's going on? Because I can't imagine that that's the move he would have made without a precondition to him being hired, being that he was going to hire Doug. But again, we'll put that to the side. He had opportunities this summer. Like, if you're going to sign Russell Westbrook anyways, why are you going to throw money at Dennis Schroeder? Use that money to go get literally any playable forward.
Yeah.
Jonathan Kuminga.
But I'm not sure to his credit, I'm not sure that Russ wanted to come here. I think that Russ played his cards, and the cards fell where no one else wanted him, and so he took the money that we were willing to give him. I think he was like, I'm going to hang on the sidelines and wait to see if there's something better that comes around.
So listening to the insiders on 1320, I think James Ham and Kyle had one of the announcers for Denver on. I think it was them. Maybe it was someone else. And basically, from what I gather, he had the opportunity to go back to Denver this year, and he chose to leave because he wanted a bigger role somewhere else. And look, he's an LA guy. It's closer to home for him. So obviously he kind of burned his bridges with the 2 LA teams. So, I mean, I think that was in the works for a while, and they were just waiting until the last minute to sign him, just for the purposes of salary cap reasons, if a trade was going to happen or if something else was going to happen before then, because these things need to be done in a certain order with a collective bargaining agreement and all that. But again, they probably should have just brought him in sooner so he could have learned the team and his teammates and Christie and all that sooner and all that. But again, like if Russ is in the cards or, whoever, like you have Malik Monk. He could play your backup point guard. He's a scorer. He can't start for you as point guard, but okay, like that's your backup point guard. You don't need Schroeder and Westbrook, which is kind of the point. And Westbrook's been good for them up to this point, which is kind of interesting. But okay, oh God, I just remembered something which is going to set me off. I'm going to try not to use profanity. Okay, so you're Vivek. You trade De'Aaron Fox for Zach LaVine. Like, I'm sorry, folks, but like everything just goes back to this. So, okay, you get functionally 5 second-round picks for Fox. That's really the draft capital you got, because the other draft picks were a 27 from San Antonio and a 30 or a 31 from Minnesota. Okay, here we go. So you let Monty take those 5 second-round picks, and he traded 3 of them for some combination of Jonas Valanciunas and Jake LaRavia.
Yep.
Okay. Literally less than 6 months later, they're both not on the team. So why did you trade? Like, not that a second round pick's the end all be all, but Draymond Green was a second round pick. Jokic was a second. Like, you got to view these things as like shots you could take at drafting a player that's going to be good. and you use it on Jonas, who's a backup center that you've been waiting for forever, and then you salary dump him to save $5 million so you could go sign Dennis Schroeder. Why not just keep him? Like, I'm talking about Scott Perry now. Why not just keep him? Because you don't have any other bigs on the team besides Domas, and sign Russ, which, like, you're already guard heavy. You don't need to spend your money on another guard. So there's that. And then Jake LaRavia, the Kings were limited to, I think, $5.1 million they could offer him just because of the way the collective bargaining agreement pencils out for someone whose option wasn't picked up. And then you lose Jake LaRavia, who you also sent draft. So it's like you basically just burned three. Monty, on his way out the door, was allowed to burn another 3 second-round picks, which he burned 2 just to unload Davion Mitchell and Sasha Vezenkov, who Damian, they could have, like, just the number of moves that just you look at in real time and think that's not a big deal, but then in retrospect, it's like, how did you do that? It's so shocking. Like, you could have used Davion Mitchell on this team when you don't have a point guard and you need defense. Okay.
Yep.
Sasha Vezenkov walked away from his contract. So you burned 2 second-round picks just to unload those 2 guys. Then the guy you got back from Toronto, I don't remember his name offhand. You then traded to San Antonio with another second-round pick just so that they could waive him. So it's like, guys, look, you're probably not going to get a franchise savior in the second round. But when you're trying to bag a guy like Jonathan Kuminga later down the road, or like something like that, these are assets you could throw into a trade to sweeten it. These are also possibilities of drafting someone who pencils out. Look at Isaiah Thomas. Look at Draymond Green. Look at Nikola Jokic. Most second-round picks are not that, obviously. But just as far as, like, asset management, this is a master class in what not to do. So
how much of being a GM do you think is appeasing the fans? And so the reason I asked that
0%.
question is because how much do you think it actually is versus how much it should be? I understand it should be 0%, but how much do you think it actually is?
I think in a town like Sacramento, it's probably like 25 to 35%, because you have a business consideration and you have an owner who I think is notoriously cheap. I mean, it's kind of, we overlook it because he saved the team from going to Seattle. But I mean, let's look at it. He's on the team for 12 years. They've never gone to the luxury tax. And, like, I don't know if you want to segue into the Doug Christie thing, because it's like the thing that keeps coming up, but he's the lowest paid coach in the NBA by a lot.
Right. But before we go there, the reason I brought that up was because at the end of last season, after we had the worst trade of all time, everyone is basically like, how did we expect to win that play-in game? We don't have a point guard, for God's sakes.
Okay.
And
which is
over
true.
the summer, of course it's true. And over the summer, the conversations were, we need a point guard, we need a point guard. Mm-hmm. And then they signed Dennis Schroeder as if he's some sort of great point guard, which I don't think either one of us think he's ever been a great point guard. But
he's in the back half of starters, but
but he was available, and so we took him on board. I think that to defend Scott Perry, which I'm not in the business of defending Kings GMs, if we would have just been like, you know what, we're going to give Russ the league minimum, we're not going to bring in a point guard, and we're just going to give Russ the league minimum, I think he would have had hell to pay with the Sacramento Kings fans. So I think that part of that signing was everyone's calling for a point guard. We got to get a legit point guard in the door. This is the most legit point guard we can find on the market. Let's just do it. So I think that goes back to that appeasing thing. Whereas I don't disagree with you. I think if we just signed Russ, I mean, Russ is he's actually not outperforming Schroeder at this point, but it's close. It's very close.
Yeah.
And so
per dollar he is.
Well, for sure, per dollar he is, of course. What I'm saying, stat lines wise, he's not beating Schroeder yet, but he's probably going to, because he's going to start taking those minutes. And so, I think that adding just Russ would have been a mistake from a PR standpoint. But I think from a logistics standpoint or a strategy standpoint, it probably would have been the right move.
Yeah, but I think if you use that full mid-level exception to bring in a power forward who's playable, and then you sign Russ with a minimum, the Kings would be in a significantly better position right now. As far as roster balance, as far as the logjam at guard, as
I
far
agree
as
with you
like trying
completely.
to keep Keon Ellis, which like again, Keon's like one of these guys that he's just like he's the quintessential like Kings overrated player in the sense that he's someone that, if he played on the Oklahoma City Thunder or on the Houston Rockets or on one of those like competent teams, like why can't the Kings get someone like that? But then you put that guy on the Kings, and because
Right.
you don't have all the other pieces that those teams have, he's just, he's not actually contributing to winning in any meaningful way. So
I heard a theory about this that I
yeah,
wanted to share.
yeah,
I heard a
the self
theory
tank.
that no, well, kind of, but
Okay.
mostly it's I mean, essentially yes. They're trying to showcase the the players that we want to move on. They're trying to showcase
Mm-hmm.
those players early in the season to show that these guys that someone should want to trade for these guys. We're talking LaVine, who again is not getting traded
Right.
because of his contract. DeRozan, they're trying to showcase these guys. And there's been this narrative that Keon Ellis is actually not part of the Kings' future, or I should say, he's not as highly valued by the organization as he is by the fan base. And
Yeah.
I heard a theory that actually the reason that he's not getting the run that people want him to is because they don't want to showcase him, and he actually is a part of our future. And so we got to kind of have him take a back seat for the time being while these other guys get some shine so that we can move on from them and he can kind of slide into one of those roles. I'm not saying I believe in this theory, but that's what I'm told. Or
Okay.
that's what I heard.
Um, Here's the thing about the NBA. This isn't like the 90s where, if you're not on national TV, people don't watch. There's no secrets. Like people know who and what Keon Ellis is. He was number 6 on ESPN's like upcoming free agent board or whatever for next season. So if ESPN's taking note of this, like you don't think literal general managers who do this for a
Yeah, of
living
course.
know that? And all you're really doing is pissing him off. And since he's going to be an unrestricted free agent, you're not even going to have the hometown advantage. So again, like I don't think the Kings like future prospects and hopes hinge on appeasing Keon Ellis. I think he's kind of overrated by Kings fans, to be honest. But he's an undrafted guy who's playable. And so just straight up as an asset, this is just piss poor management of your assets. Um, and frankly, he probably does do things that from a mesh standpoint, he's going to do things for your team that you don't have. Whether that means he's like a super talented player who needs to start or something is a different story. I
Right.
think he's a rotation player on a good team. I'm not sure he's a starter on a good team. But regardless, when you find a player like that, especially in an undrafted manner, and you kind of developed him through Stockton, you don't want to just watch him walk away for nothing. And that's kind of what the Kings are sleepwalking into right now.
Yep. I would
So
agree with that. I would agree.
so we had some predictions. I think you said 38 wins. I took the over on that. I said 39, but that was before the Russ signing and before the Keegan Murray injury, and of course before the Nick Clifford injury because he got injured the first game of the season. So
Right.
I'd like to just like publicly, and it's a cop out because it's been like 2 weeks into the season, but I'd like to revise my number down. I don't think the Kings are going to win 30 games this year, which is like kind of wild because that's really bad. Like even some of the DeMarcus Cousins teams, I think, won 30 games. Um, but this is a really, really bad team. And in a period when the league is looking to shed salary, I don't think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for trades because the Kings don't have a lot of Moneyball good contracts. I mean, I think
Right.
all their best players are on bad contracts, which is part of why they're so bad. So
is DeRozan on a bad contract? Because I think he's probably our most movable piece, but he's not movable in the short term, and that's the problem, right? So, I don't think you're going to see a trade for him in the next 3 weeks because you're going to wait for these teams that need a bucket getter towards the end of the season when it's time for a playoff run. I don't think teams are going to be looking at DeRozan as somebody who's going to come in here early in the season and help them win a bunch of games because I don't think that's his role anymore.
well, I think that unfortunately, I think the Kings should approach things from the standpoint of we're willing to lose a trade, which I think is kind of a problem that the Kings historically have lost trades, but they've done so for like financial reasons under the Maloofs or it just pure incompetence in other
Or
scenarios.
accidentally, like the
Yeah.
Fox trade.
But I think you should purposely lose a trade just for fit at this point. Like trade Malik Monk. Like if Malik's not going to be part of your future, I think I personally wouldn't like to do this, but I'm just kind of looking at who you can move. Malik's a movable piece, in my opinion. Like I think he's worth his salary, and he's younger and cheaper than DeMar DeRozan. Trade Malik Monk for a forward who's not as good as Malik Monk. Like you don't want to get in the habit of doing that, but I think that that's going to help you be a better team today. And I think that it's going to give you a better idea of what you have around the roster as far as Neat Clifford, as far as Keegan Murray, as far as Keon Ellis to the extent that he's part of the future, Maxime, any of the young guys who you might be moving forward with into the future. If you have a competent forward on your team, like not a star, you're not going to get that for anyone on the Kings current roster.
Yeah, a professional, competent forward.
But just like someone who you're not just losing that matchup every single time, including against the bench. Like you need some minutes.
You'd be okay to make that move even if it resulted in less wins?
I don't think you see that's the thing. I don't think that results in less wins necessarily. You're losing the trade because you're getting the less talented player, but you're kind of balancing out your roster by doing that.
Right. Okay. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
because I mean, again, like you tell me that we can move on from Zach LaVine. We're not going to go trade Zach LaVine for another guy who scores 30 points a night. That's just not going to happen. But if we wanted to move on from Zach LaVine, which I think most of us do, you're going to have to take an L in that trade. Whether it's you're going to take picks back or you're going to take younger talent that could potentially develop. But that's also most likely going to result in more lost games. Now, when we're talking about potentially not winning 30 games versus winning, 35 games, it's like, who cares, honestly? But, I think you got to accept that reality, which kind of goes back to that soft tanking thing, right? You're going to go back and you're going to, in order to get the roster to where you want it to be, you're going to have to accept you're going to lose more games, but you're going to lose more games with a purpose. And that purpose is not necessarily to get a higher draft pick. So I guess it's not tanking. It's just strategically, it's accepting more losses, which will inevitably result in a higher draft pick.
So I want to play something, and we can comment on it. And then I have a controversial take after I play it. So Here we go.
Like this guy, they have no chance. There's no point for the team. They have one playoff series appearance since 06. They haven't won a playoff series since 04. They haven't made the finals ever. And they just seem to keep popping up whenever weird shit happens. I feel bad for the Kings fans because we got a taste of how cool it was once upon a time. 2 years ago, it feels like 20 with Light the Beam. And then they just decided to reassemble the 2023 Chicago Bulls with Sabonis. And that's where we are now.
This is the Hindenburg of NBA teams this year.
Okay. So here's my controversial take. The national media does not pay attention to what happens in Sacramento at all. And actually they use the Kings as a punching bag to kind of have their smart boy, like, oh, like I'm so much smarter than the Kings general manager or Kings owner. But here's the thing. Their lack of attention to what's happening in Sacramento is actually an advantage and this is actually like kind of a realization that I've had. In some ways, we're so deep in things in Sacramento. We know about like all the minute details that happen that we get bogged down in that. Whereas the national media, they don't see any of that noise. They just look at the team and think, here's what I think. Boom.
Right.
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 And so I would urge Kings fans to actually listen to what the national media has to say about the Kings, with the understanding that they're idiots. Like, they're not, I have no respect for any of these people, like on a personal or professional level. I think that they're really just paid to go out there and have a take on everything. And I don't think that most human beings are capable of having a take on everything. There's many things in life that I don't have an opinion on. But their job is to have an opinion. And when that's your job and you have to have an opinion on everything, you're going to come up with a lot of really dumb opinions. But I think with the Kings, it's so black and white as far as like what has actually happened here. And I want to use the Keon Ellis situation as an example. If Keon Ellis played for the Lakers, no one in Los Angeles would be worried about him getting minutes. They would be worried about whether the team is winning or losing and trying to figure out how they can get some all-star from some other team onto their team. And like,
Agreed.
this is the problem, I think, with Kings fans, is because we don't believe that we deserve good things. We get bogged down in how many minutes Keon Ellis is playing. And yeah, like maybe the Kings would, marginally, maybe the analytics would show like a better offensive and defensive rating if he got more minutes or whatever. But that's not fundamentally what matters about the Kings. What matters about the Kings is your best player is Sabonis, probably. And he's like on a championship team, he's like a third or fourth best player.
Correct. Yep.
And then Zach LaVine, same thing. Like maybe he's your best player. It's him and Sabonis. Like those are your top two. And Zach LaVine is an offensive weapon. He's a legit offensive weapon. That dude
can he can average get 30 a night.
He can get you 30 a night.
Right.
But he's not going to lead a team in the playoffs. Like he's demonstrated that. He's a 30-something-year-old guy. He's not going to change at this point. So you need to figure out, okay, how do we get a really good player here? And that's why I think the Jonathan Kuminga stuff was so interesting this summer. The odds are Jonathan Kuminga is also not going to be that guy, but he's got a shot at it. You know who doesn't have a shot at it? Zach LaVine and Domas Sabonis. We know what they are. We don't know what a 22-year-old kid who's been kind of hampered in Golden State is going to actually turn into. The early indicators are probably not an all-star, but there's a chance he shows flashes of it. So,
but I think that's the same thing. Even when you and I had totally opposite takes on the Jonathan Kuminga thing.
I know,
because I actually am going to kind of piggyback on what you said earlier, where when you and I were talking about Jonathan Kuminga, I was like, he's not the guy. And but the way you're talking right now is like, he might be the guy. Like maybe we got to go get this guy so that he can be the guy. And I'm like,
he might be a guy.
But he's a piece. I think I agree he could be a piece. But to talk about him like he could be the thing that saves Sacramento is he's just not that guy. So it goes back to the same thing that we've always done in Sacramento and that we've always talked about is we overvalue our guys. Again, for Fox, we did not get the value that we should have gotten out of him. No. But Fox is not the guy.
Fox is closer to being the guy than anyone the Kings currently have, though. But
I agree with you on that. But like when we go to trade Domas, people are going to expect the world for Domas, and we're not going to get anything for Domas.
No, he's on a bad contract.
And it's the same thing with the rest of our roster. Like,
all
of the pieces that we have to trade, we're not going to get anything back from. First of all, because everyone knows we're desperate. Because everyone, like you said, everyone can see the roster that we have. They're like, these guys are going to try to be making moves. So this is like easy pickings, which it feels like Sacramento's in this position all the time.
Right. But, which is like, you got to lose the trade, but you don't do it with like your best asset. You do it with like Malik Monk, who's your sixth man, right? Like that's the way I do it. Look, we agree 100%. I'm not saying the Kuminga thing would likely have led to any type of turnaround for the franchise, but it's the type of calculated swing that you should take because he could be a guy. He fits the timeline a lot better. And
I agree with that.
You know,
I
and
would
like
like to see him on the team. Don't get me wrong. It's just
here's
one of those ones where I'm like, he's not the savior of Sacramento.
but here's the big bullet point. If a sticking point in bringing him on and taking that swing is like Keon Ellis, like that's where I radically depart from Kings fans, because we're at a point right now where I think actually you have to trade Keon Ellis in the next couple months because there's no guarantee he's coming back, and you can't just lose him for nothing. If
Right. I
he
agree.
would have been the difference between let's take a swing on Jonathan Kuminga or not, like you throw him in there and you make the trade happen. But if that's the case, and you know you're not gonna make that swing, and you don't have an extension lined up for him, what's your plan there? Is your plan to overpay him the way you overpaid Keegan Murray? You know?
Well, I think that probably is the plan, because I think he's probably going to do exactly what these free agents do to Sacramento, which is they're gonna demand a role, and if he doesn't get the role, you know, he's not gonna want to come back to Sacramento and still be the guy off the bench or still be second fiddle. It's like he wants to be a guy, and so he's gonna make those kind of demands, and it'll be up to Sacramento, you know, front office to see if they're going to be willing to either make him the guy or tell him they'll make him the guy and then do whatever they're going to do with him.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on the Keegan Murray extension, since we haven't talked about it on the podcast?
Again, I like that we're keeping Keegan around. I think he's a good asset to have on the team. You know, I don't know. I think we overpaid him, and I think it's going to be something that he's going to have to try to live up to if we're going to expect to get the value out of it. I will say this: it wouldn't surprise me if we traded Keegan Murray. That's not talked about a whole lot, but
he certainly shouldn't be off the table. I think you just kind of ruined some of his value now that you hung that kind of extension on him. But look,
I don't disagree. But if he's one of those guys that I'm like, if he has an exceptional season, kind of like with Fox, like when Fox had that exceptional season, we should have moved on Fox because he was already giving us all the signals that he wanted out anyways. So you got to sell high on these guys. And so that is exactly how I would be playing the Keegan Murray situation when it comes to possibly trading him.
I think that this is just a situation where the Kings bid against themselves. He was a restricted free agent. You could have let the market set his price this summer. And, you're going to hurt his feelings? So what? Like, I mean, at some point, you got to have some respect for yourself. Like,
right.
You can't overpay your own players, and that's what they did here. And you actually made it harder to move him in some sort of trade because, on a rookie scale contract, I'd love me some Keegan Murray. At $28 million a year, I mean, that's like Zach LaVine levels bad contract. You know, if Zach LaVine, who's averaging 30 points a game right now, isn't worth his $40-something million, $47 million contract, you think Keegan's worth 28?
Yeah, it's 16 points a game or something.
There's no way. So,
yeah.
All right. I want to start talking about the Kings coaching situation and Doug Christie, and I want to start us off with a clip here from one of our local celebrities.
Will it work? I got one hand saying fuck no.
The one thing about Mike Brown is that first year
is always good. Mike is a great person. He's just, to me, he's not a leader of men. You have to be, I couldn't imagine it now because these kids are making so much money. You have to have the respect of them. And I think Mike is such a nice guy. That's what fucks Mike up. Mike wants to be cool with everyone instead of putting his foot down like, this is my team, this is what's going on. So that's why I feel like I've seen it. He was my coach with the Lakers. We had Mike after Phil Jackson retired. And when I tell you, rest in peace to my dog Kobe and Ron Artest, they walked all over that motherfucker. They used to sub themselves in and out of games. I'm just like, oh, shit.
All right. So we'll get into Doug, but thoughts on that? Because I thought that was spot on, I'll just say.
You know, I mean, I think after seeing how Mike ran the team after year one, I can't disagree with what he said. It seemed like he lost the locker room. Again, I think Mike's antics are interesting. Like the rah-rah antics and the running up and down the court and screaming and all that stuff. I think they're interesting. I obviously, I mean, he did a hell of a job in year one, taking us to the playoffs. So I got to give him his props for that. But I think it became pretty clear that he lost the locker room, and there's not a whole lot else that needs to be said. Matt Barnes knows what he's talking about.
Del
And watching,
Campo,
I'll say this: watching Mike Bibby laugh his ass off about that was just great.
that is funny.
Like seeing another NBA player, like knowing exactly what he's talking about. That's how you know it's true.
Yeah, it's well, Del Campo's own Matt Barnes goes on to say later on in the clip, but I don't want to get a copyright strike or something. That basically what you just said, like this is why year one in Sacramento had looked good, and then after the first year, he started getting walked all over, and this is a lot of what we heard. Like there were players who didn't want him, there were players who backed him. I personally think De'Aaron Fox used that as an excuse to get himself out of Sacramento. I don't think that De'Aaron Fox actions actually jived with what he said about Mike Brown. Because if you remember the last game before Mike Brown was fired, De'Aaron Fox gave up that 4-point play and
Right, yep.
proceeded to go to the press and say, what difference does it make? We lost the game, taking no accountability at a time when Mike Brown was calling him out by name to take accountability as a leader of the team. But again, you hire Mike Brown. He's probably the best coach you've had since Rick Adelman. Like, I mean, Dave Yeager was a good coach too, so I'd probably put Dave Yeager up there. But okay, he's
Malone.
Well, yeah. I mean, Mike Malone was here for like 90 games or whatever.
Right.
Freaking, he barely registers. I mean, like, I don't know. At the time, it felt like he was here forever. But looking back on it,
Yeah.
I don't associate him with former Kings coaches for whatever reason. But yeah, Mike Brown, I don't even think is that great of an NBA coach. I think Matt Barnes is absolutely right. Where has he gone and had his team really outperform like what they were supposed to be on paper, with possibly the exception of that being team one team, which, if we're being honest, they were just really lucky that the rest of the West was injured. Like,
I was going to say, we
even
stayed
that
healthy the entire year. We did start 0-4 that year, so there's still hope for this season, Toke.
No,
but
the Kings were one of the younger teams in the NBA at that time. Now they're the third oldest, so no, it's downhill from here for the 37-year-olds.
I think Mike actually would turn out to be a great college coach. I'm to be totally honest, I'm not sure if he's ever been a college coach, but that kind of rah-rah stuff works with the kids who are hustling and playing their butts off to try to make it to the next level, or whatever that happens to be, whatever their motivation is. That's why I like watching college sports in general better than I like watching professional sports for the most part, is because these guys are actually trying. And so that kind of stuff works. But when you're trying to do that stuff, when you're calling timeouts and you're trying to make a point, you're calling timeouts 20 seconds into a game, you're trying to make points to these guys who are making $40 million a year, $25 million a year. There's a whole different set of motivation for these guys. And Mike Brown I don't think he knows how to tap into that outside of, once the momentum goes away of the first year.
All right. So moving on to Doug Christie, Mike Brown's replacement. You just said he would be that Mike Brown would be a good college coach because of rah-rah stuff. But I mean, from Doug, what we've gotten since he's been named, not the interim, but the official head coach of the team, is this like, we want to defend 94 feet and a lot of this rah-rah buy-in stuff.
Right.
I mean, don't you kind of feel like Doug's playing into the same failed strategy that Mike Brown had?
I think it remains to be seen. Again, Doug's not doing all the cartoonish. It's the clip that's just sticking out of my mind of Mike Brown is the running up and down the court, yelling, or like when he's in his interviews doing the yelling, all that stuff. Like Doug's not doing all. He's not doing all that stuff. So I think there comes a point where you have to establish the identity of your team. And I think it's important to note that the only identity this team can have is a defensive identity, because it's the only thing they can control. the offensive side of the ball is a disaster. The roster makeup's a disaster. And so they're going to have to hang their hat on the effort plays, which is on the defensive side of things. So I think he's trying to hammer that culture home, whether that sticks beyond, last year or this year, I think remains to be seen. But no, I don't think he's fallen into the same exact pitfalls that Mike Brown fell into. But honestly, I just don't know if Doug Christie has the coaching skills. And when I say I don't know, I mean I literally don't know, because he's never done it before. Because he has absolutely no history of being a successful coach anywhere else. So he's never been in the trenches as a coach where a team is incredibly dejected because they're 1-4 and there's about 2 winnable games out of the next 20 on the schedule. So I think these next 20 games is going to be that's going to kind of decide his future. Not that I think he's going to get fired this year, because I don't. I think that.
So I want to jump in here. So I think that, well, my general take is it's kind of complicated to explain, but I think the number of people that could be an average coach is a lot higher than probably most people would think. I don't think it's that difficult to coach. I think really it's like, if you imagine a distribution curve, I think it's very much like that. I think that like a lot of people who just know basic basketball could coach an NBA team like at an average level. It's really going to be driven more by the talent you have on the roster than anything. And it's like, okay, when do you sub? You have assistants to help you with the offense and the defense and all that. To me, really, like, there are outliers that actually add a ton of value. And like probably at any given point in time, there's like 5 coaches who do that. I think outside of that, like, coaches are largely just PR people and scapegoats. Like Mike Malone, I think, had Denver overachieving every year that he was a coach there. Like, so he's one that I would put in just to, like, I think Ime Udoka is another one, right? Like there's a handful of those coaches that exist. So like, is Doug Christie a better or a worse coach than JJ Redick? Like, there's not a ton of criticism about JJ Redick getting the Lakers job, but the Lakers are in the playoffs every year, so they can afford to have a coach who's just average and then like let him kind of have a couple years, and if he's not, doesn't prove to be exceptional, move on to someone else. The Kings, again, there's no, going back to Carmichael Dave's tweet from like 2012 or 2013, there is no salary cap for how much you pay your general manager and how much you pay your head coach or your coaching staff or your training staff or anything like that.
Right.
If you're in a really bad cap situation, as the Kings are, why not just spend all your money on getting a coach who's elite, who's proven themselves, who, like, I would, like, the guy I would have gone after is Jeff Van Gundy. Like, I would have overpaid him, and I would have told him the only way he's getting out of that contract is if he gets like arrested or something. Like, yeah. Don't think you're gonna take the money from the Kings and then get fired in a couple years and get paid for doing nothing. Like, no, I'm actually gonna go on a yacht somewhere.
Like, we're gonna force you to work.
You're actually gonna do this, but you're gonna get $. You're gonna get a lot of money for it, right? Like, Doug Christie is the lowest paid coach in the entire NBA, which tells you that not a single other team would have hired him. I think the Phoenix Suns just hired a rookie coach. He's making $3.5 million. Doug Christie's making $2 million.
Right.
So Doug Christie's making 60% of what the second lowest paid coach is making. Like, he's by far the lowest paid coach. That speaks a lot to me as to like what exactly Doug Christie is to the franchise right now, which is he's a placeholder while they're paying Mike Brown his contract, which they stupidly gave him before his first contract even expired. Like, literally, they're eating the entire cost of the second contract, because last year was the last year of his first contract, which I think they renegotiated. But follow me. So you're basically telling Doug, like, okay, you could coach a team for the next 2 years and you're not going to get fired because we don't want to pay a third coach.
Right.
But we're not going to commit to you beyond that. So that's, I think, what Doug Christie's life is going to be as the Kings coach. He's going to coach here for the 2 full seasons that he's the head coach and then the half season that he finished for Mike Brown. And that's it. Like there is almost zero chance that he sees the 3rd year of this contract.
Correct. And I think that is because I like to think that there's some sort of grand design behind all this, but knowing the Kings, there's probably not. But, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Scott Perry basically decided exactly what I was saying earlier, which is I'm going to have to reshape this entire roster, which is going to include getting rid of almost everybody. And I need a coach. We're not going to go hire Jeff Van Gundy while we have this roster. We'll go hire Jeff Van Gundy once we get the washout. And so I think Doug Christie's the sacrificial lamb. And this is what I was saying. I said this in the group text the other day, as I was like, Bobby Jackson's next. Who's next? Like, what other Kings great are we going to bring in here so that
Mike has to get a shot.
That's what I'm saying. Mike's going to get a shot. Like there's like what other Kings great can we get in here to slap in the face?
Hey, where's Tony Delk?
Yeah, exactly.
What's Tony Delk doing in 2025?
If C. Webb called, he would be the GM in 2 years. There's just no question about it. But we're at a. This is what we do. This is what we do. And the reason that I think that they did this was because, again, they knew they could get away with it. The town loves Doug, so what there's not going to be an uprising for hiring Doug because we like him as a guy. And they can basically say, well, see, we gave him a shot, even though that we all agree wasn't a fair shot. We gave him a shot. Now we're going to bring somebody else in that actually knows how to coach. So I actually hope that's the design. I hope that's what they're doing, because otherwise it's just a terrible look, right? Otherwise, I think the other side of that coin is we still have a win now mandate from Vivek. And Vivek's mandating that Doug's the. I don't know if we do anymore. And we have a mandate that Doug's the coach, and so like that I think is worst case scenario, because that is a totally delusional scenario. At least the scenario where we brought him on to be the sacrificial lamb. Like, it sucks for him, but at least it's like, all right, there's something, like, we got a plan.
Well, for me, the way that I look at it, so Carmichael Dave said something on Twitter, and I'm not going to get into my whole back and forth with him because this wasn't actually my back and forth. This was a separate interaction altogether. But he was like, well, what's the point of bringing in like a coach, kind of along the lines of what you're saying? And my take is like, well, you want to start establishing a system so that even if you have a system that's going to, you want that system in place that's going to outlive the current roster, just so you can start assessing things within that system. Okay, so here's the style that we want to play. Let's play that style. Does this guy fit this style? Like, you're not doing yourself any favor in a talent evaluation or in a player development standpoint, for example, with Nick Clifford or Maxime, or, to be frank, Keegan Murray still, to the extent that you have any hopes of developing him beyond what he currently is. I think the system matters. And that's kind of where I would hang my hat on. Like, you bring Jeff Van Gundy, and yeah, these are going to be 2 long lost years. You're going to need to revamp the entire roster, but you're instilling a coach who is excellent, who's proven at different franchises that he could take them deep into the playoffs, and he can develop talent, and he can actually get them playing defense. I think that by bringing Doug in, you're actually just creating more questions when you're evaluating talent, because you're like, okay, well, is this Doug, or is this the players, or is this what Nick Clifford is, or is this what Keegan Murray is, or would Keegan Murray look like? I feel like as a Kings fan, there have been so many guys that have come through the Kings where it's like, this guy on San Antonio would look good, but on the Kings, he doesn't. And then you see it, like, you bring in Marco Bellinelli. You're like, okay, we got Marco Bellinelli. Can't do anything in Sacramento. Goes back to the Spurs, and he's like starting for them, and they're in the playoffs. Like,
right. Yep.
So I think that that's like where I would argue is like, You can't really do anything when you're paying $90 million for Domas and Zach. Like, okay, your salary cap is sideways,
Yeah,
you know?
obliterated.
But what you can do is bring in a really good coach. You're going to have to overpay because why the hell would a good coach want to come here? But you're going to do the overpay. You're going to tell them up front, like, look, unless you start illegally gambling at like fixed card games, you're going to see through the end of your contract. And that's just what it is. So, like, don't think you're just going to take this job and mail it in. Like, you're actually going to have to do the job.
Yeah, but you
And,
also got to consider the fan base. So again, I think that I actually disagree with you on this. I actually kind of don't mind the sacrificial lamb theory, because again, you bring in Jeff Van Gundy and the team is awful and still doesn't win more than 35 games each season. That you're going to poison the well, and the fan base is going to turn on him too. So I think you bring somebody like that in when you have a decent situation to bring them into, not a what needs to happen is a full rebuild. And I know we don't like to talk about that as Kings fans, but that's actually what needs to happen. And I don't know what the timeline is for that or how quickly we can get rid of everybody, but that's essentially what has to happen for this to be a roster that can contend. So,
well, unfortunately, the
for like even relativity.
opportunity for a real good rebuild ended when they traded De'Aaron Fox, because that was your trade chip that was going to get you some prospects and like draft capital for the future. I think where you're at now, you do need to get value for the assets you do have and take steps back. But I don't think you could tear it down and try to get that number one pick. Like, that hasn't worked.
No, I'm not talking about getting the number one pick. I'm talking about, like you said, trading down for people that make more sense. Trading for, again, not number one picks, but picks. You don't need to be the worst team in the league to try to get the number one pick, because that's usually not who gets the number one pick. But you can strategically reform your roster, which will result in losing more games, which will result in a better pick, which usually has a better odds of resulting in a good player.
I mean, look, if the Kings, let's just pretend we had a time machine. If we could go back in time and De'Aaron Fox dropped 60 points against the Minnesota Timberwolves last December, that's probably the peak of like his trade value, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that day you decided, you know what, we're going to trade De'Aaron Fox, he doesn't want to sign an extension, he's not actually the guy who's going to get us to the promised land, and since he's not committing to us long term, we need to open this up. And let's say hypothetically, the Spurs came to you instead of there being an opportunity for his agent to do what he did.
Right.
And they're like, we'll give you Stephon Castle and like the Atlanta pick or our pick or something, whatever, right? That trade makes you worse immediately. But you're taking a step back as a franchise and reloading. Like, that's what should have happened. That's not I wouldn't classify that as a rebuild. That's a step back and reload.
But just doing that, you would need to move other pieces. So, like, again, if we have the same, well, I guess in your scenario, we don't have LaVine on the team.
Right.
So, okay, that changes a little bit. But you'd still probably need to get rid of DeRozan because, again, he's not the guy. Yeah. What I mean is that, yes, that would have been an ideal move, but you still have to move a number of other pieces.
Having a 35-year-old DeMar DeRozan making $25 million a year and averaging 22 points a game on your team is not the worst thing in the world, because like,
but it's the style of basketball. It's when he's your second option or your whatever.
Here's my argument. Okay, this is like my fundamental disagreement with Carmichael Dave and everyone. You have Nick Clifford, right? You have like these young guys. If you were to turn around and say, okay, you know what? And like in this scenario, we don't have Nick Clifford, but like, he's the player that I'm going to use for this example. Okay, Nick Clifford. He's actually a potential future piece. Let's get rid of Zach LaVine. Let's get rid of DeMar DeRozan, and let's just play 40 minutes a night of Nick Clifford. And now Nick Clifford is your number one option on offense. Whether or not he's ever going to be a number one option on a good team, you're now putting him in a situation where the other team's like, that's the guy that they're going to go to.
Yeah, we're just going to beat him down.
We're going to put our best defender on him.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have no individual success at the NBA level, and they're going to lose games at the NBA level. Whereas if you have DeMar DeRozan on the team and you're like, you know what, he's our number one guy. Like, we're playing for the future anyways, but we're going to use this guy for the structure of the team. So he's going to draw the best defender. He's going to, be the guy that we go to in crunch time. And opportunistically, Nick Clifford will have openings where he's maybe going up against a second unit or going up against a lesser defender on the first unit. And he's having those small wins earlier in his career because you have DeMar DeRozan on the team. I think that that's really good and important and has a lot of value for player development. That's where, like, I depart from what's the point of even having DeMar DeRozan on the team?
I think that if you want to have DeMar DeRozan on the roster as a developmental piece to the roster so that you can have, again, we're using Nick Clifford as the example. If you want to have Nick Clifford going out there and having somebody to take a little pressure off, I don't mind that idea. But I think that you have to go into that situation with the understanding that you're not going to have a team that is a competitive team with DeMar DeRozan as your number one option. So as long as you're okay that it's not a win now opportunity and it's a development opportunity, that's great. But if you're thinking this is going to be a win now situation, then you do have to move on from DeMar DeRozan and a number of other folks on the roster.
Okay, but do you think they win more games with him on the roster than without?
Again, I don't agree with you in this. I don't have the you win by winning mentality. I think that there is a value to losing games and getting a better draft pick. I don't think that the Kings should live in obscurity forever and try to win as many games as possible, but just be bad at winning and end up with the 13th pick in the draft every year. That doesn't excite me at all. So I think there's a value to getting a better draft pick. I understand you can find gems everywhere in the draft, but I think it stands to reason that you have a better opportunity of finding a higher quality player the lower you draft.
All right, just state the obvious. Obviously, I would rather have a higher draft pick than a lower draft pick. Obviously.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Okay. But I want to point out that over half of the All-Stars in the All-Star game last year were taken outside of the top 10 when they were drafted, which means the Kings could have drafted almost all of them. Like, they couldn't have drafted LeBron, Kevin Durant, and
I understand. I understand.
Right? So, like, I think my counterpoint would be, yes, all things being equal, you want the higher pick, obviously. But I think you're going to have shots and there's going to be good players on the board wherever you're picking. And either you can do a good job picking or you can't. And that's just the bottom line. If you're not good at picking, you could have the second pick hypothetically in the 2018 draft.
Yeah.
And draft Marvin Bagley.
I mean, listen, we agree that of course, like, you have to make the picks, but again, I think it's a guaranteed if you're going to have the 13th pick in the draft that you're going to have a harder time. I think, as we've said, the Kings have shown that they have to luck into good draft picks. It has to be the person that's already sitting there. Like, they didn't choose De'Aaron Fox because he was some guy that they had intel on that nobody else had. He was on the board. It was the most obvious guy to pick, so we picked him and he turned into what he was. So we're not making any magic happen here in the draft. And so I think that's kind of the point is, could there be somebody at that 13th pick that's going to be sitting there that you think you found something in? Sure. But I think that person's more likely to be there at 5. And so if you have to be losing and you're going to be losing, do it with a purpose.
Okay. I'm not going to sit here and argue later picks are better, obviously.
No, I know. Yeah.
I mean, right now, the top 5 players in the NBA, 3 of them were not top 10 picks. Shea was 11,
right?
Yanni was 15, and Jokic was a second rounder. So again, Ant-Man was the first pick, and Luka was the third pick. Like, okay, those are your two like top 5 guys. And by the way, you could have drafted 4 out of the 5. Just gonna throw that out there without tanking.
Right.
All right, let's wrap this up on kind of the broader NBA. We got some gambling scandals. I mean, 2 very different situations. One in which a player was faking injuries and stuff so that his friends could bet the under on parlays. And then the Chauncey Billups one is really just odd. I've heard other people named. I'm not going to, until they're actually like indicted, I don't want to, get into that. But functionally, we heard about the 5 New York families really using some of these old NBA players as like bait to lure some suckers and marks into like a fixed poker game.
Right.
If you've seen The Sopranos, this is, like I think in that show they had who's that New York Giants linebacker, Ulti or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is a thing. And I've kind of joked that, okay, we're going to get our 2002 championship banner at the end of this somehow. So that's kind of the direction I'm going with that. What are your thoughts?
I think that it's super wide ranging. My immediate thought, I went straight to Michael Jordan. I'm like, and this is why some guys got to go play baseball for a year. The gambling in the NBA has been going on forever. And I think it was Pat Bev that said, he's like, when this is all said and done, there's not going to be a coach or a player left standing. And so I think that it happens all the time, man. I mean, how many clips have we seen? Wasn't it Draymond last year that was like someone hit a late game layup and he's like, oh, like that was the over, or something like that. Like these
There's
guys
a bunch of clips like that. I mean,
like,
Gary Payton II, like,
that's what I'm like. These guys are all aware of the lines, and you think they're aware of the lines because they're just curious and like they follow this.
Well,
stuff
it's on your
identify.
phone. You can't avoid it anymore.
But dude, it's on my phone, and I couldn't tell you what the line is, right?
No,
like because I'm not betting the game.
If you go to the Apple like sports app that they have, like when you have that app on your phone, it's on your like notifications.
No.
The Kings play tonight, and they're like, "Here, I got it." Sports app.
What I mean is that, like, again, I get those same notifications, and if I'm betting a game, I'm locked in on what that is. If I'm not betting the game, then I don't care about what that is. But these guys are talking about it mid-game, like, oh, like they're having a actual physical reaction to the overhitting. It's like that, like there is a there. And so I think, my immediate thought is, yeah, man, of course, this is how it goes.
I'm just going to take the super unpopular position here, which is I think these guys already make way too much money. I mean, the fact, like when Doug Christie was playing, the Kings signed him to a pretty lucrative contract extension, which was like $48 million for 6 years or something. And it came out, it's like, what is that? Like $8 million a year. I can't do math right now. Like, okay, $8 million a year for like a guy who's a starting caliber player. Like, I can get my mind around that. But you're giving Keegan Murray $28 million a year.
Right.
And then like Zach LaVine's making $49 million, and then you have Shohei Ohtani making $70 million. Like, what is, and I know different sport, but like, what is going on? Like, some of these franchises were worth like $100 million when I was growing up. And like, you have guys making.
Are you saying this like the fact that these guys shouldn't be gambling because of that? Yeah, but bro, it's not about that. It's not about the money. Like it's about the rush. It's about all that. Plus, I think you look at Chauncey Billups, I can't imagine a scenario where Chauncey Billups was not put in an incredibly uncomfortable position for some reason. I have no idea what that reason is. But again, we've all seen the mafia shows where they got some dirt on you, and now you got to do what they tell you to do. And so,
someone floats you at like some event you're at for like $20 grand or something, and you don't have it like on you, and now they got you.
Now
right?
Because that one doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Terry Rozier trying to give his homie some homie hookups, like, hey, I'm not playing tonight, bet the under. That stuff, I'm like, that's probably him just helping his homies out, which is not good, but like it is what it is. I did see a hilarious clip where he like all of his mistakes from last year, and they were like, I knew he couldn't be this bad.
I mean, Terry Rozier was a good player on the Celtics, and he was
That's
pretty good
for
you know,
sure.
but I actually kind of have a different take. I mean, like you're making 26 mil a year, like Terry, like whatever. Chauncey, to me, that one kind of smells like we'll pay you $100,000 to make an appearance, right? And then like you're going to leverage that to get someone on the hook. And Chauncey may or may not even know, or if he knows like that the game is fixed, he's kind of maybe justifying it to himself like, well, I'm just getting paid a flat salary. I'm not like getting a cut of what, and I haven't read the indictment, so I don't know exactly what they're alleging. But like to me, I could kind of see this like you're a high profile guy. Nightclubs and bars will pay you like $25K to make an appearance, right?
Sure.
Like,
Okay.
these things happen. So it's like, all right, you want to come to a exclusive card game? We'll give you $100,000. You just got to show up and play a few hands. Like,
listen, if he wasn't aware of it, then like I hope he beats the charges. Because if he's just getting paid $100,000 to show up and play some poker, and the guy loves poker, and someone's willing to pay him, like, bro, by all means, so, like I get it.
Who among us?
Yeah, I get it. I get it. But if he's, because my understanding is he was pulling in friends, he was pulling in like some names.
That's really slimy. If he was doing it with people he had relationships with,
And I can't remember the pro poker player's name, but it was a clip that I saw when this was just coming out. And he's like, he's like, we knew about this going on in like 2021. We knew about the Chauncey told me to pull up to this game, and I'm like, no way, dude. I know exactly what happens at these games. And he's like the places these games were being held, like you knew who ran those spots, like you knew, like if you're in the know, you're like, no, I'm steering clear of these things. And the people, it was all suckers, right? And so that's where it becomes a problem. And what was it? Some guy's in the hole like 7 million or something. There's like some outrageous amount of money where a guy's in the hole. So yeah, man, I don't know. It's a tough look for Big Buckets Billups, but we'll see.
All right, man. Let's get out of here on this. What's going to happen in the World Series?
Tell you what, brother, we're going back to Canada. Hopefully, I know you're a Blue Jays fan, so you're not even going to agree with this, but hopefully,
technically, I'm a Sacramento A's fan.
There you go. For the time being, hopefully it goes 7 games. That's all I'm going to say. If it goes 7 games, anything can happen. Yamamoto's on the mound for the Dodgers in Game 6 on Friday, so I like the odds there. But I'll tell you what, my immediate thought. I'm a Dodgers fan. My immediate thought was these guys are not getting up for these last 2 games. They didn't even get up when they got to the World Series. There's not a whole lot of emotion. They're acting like they belong there, and we need to see a little bit more emotion out of these guys. You see the Jays are playing like it's their last games or their last series, which it is. And the Dodgers, I'm not feeling the hunger. So hopefully that changes. Hopefully that long plane ride, they got some time to think.
Here's what I'll leave us on. I found out the Dodgers do not have the highest payroll in baseball. They're number 2. The Mets actually have a $3 million higher payroll than the Dodgers this season.
There you go.
The Blue Jays, number 5.
I was going to say, people think the Blue Jays are like this little team that doesn't spend money. No, they drop big money, and they got good players.
Just to tie it all up, what number in the NBA do you think the Kings are?
Jeez.
This is like sad, actually, what I'm about to say.
Because it's high?
Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know, 10?
8.
Give me a break.
Unless ChatGPT is wrong, but
I'm sure it's right. It's always right. That's disgusting.
All right.
That's disgusting.
We're gonna drop this likely on Friday, so and we'll go from there. We'll see. Let's see what we got on the docket. We got Saturday at Milwaukee.
I was just about to ask Toke. I did a quick rundown of our next 20 games, and I see 2 games, and they're the last 2 of those 20. I think it's Phoenix and Utah.
There's an Atlanta game somewhere that's winnable.
Yeah, that's the second night of a back-to-back.
It is the second out of a back-to-back.
And I think
Look.
we're in Memphis the night before, so it's not like it's
The worst
that-
teams in NBA history have won
don't
11
get-
games. Like the Kings are going to
don't get me
win some
wrong,
games
of
they
cour-
shouldn't win,
Yeah,
which is
of
going to
course.
like I kind of said, look, when I found out Keegan was hurt, like the target needs to be like at least 5-15, maybe, 6-14. I don't see any way that they get. I think that they're probably going to be like 3-17 at the end of 20. So that's
what I would
take.
guess. That's what I would guess.
All right, man. Well, we'll talk about more bad basketball. I mean, at some point we're going to keep doing the podcast without even watching games because like there's this macro analysis that you can do that doesn't require you to watch the games, but we're not there yet. So anyway,
At a certain point, we'll just be saying the same thing.
all right, go Kings.
All right, Doug, go Kings.